We are one of the leading cannabis producers, marketers on a medical platform up until last Wednesday, and now we are absolutely being a market leader in the recreational world, which I'll speak to in a little while. For any investment bankers, I am not going to read word for word, but this is standard disclosure. I think we all know what I'm trying to say here. We have a motto. We have a good thing growing. I'm going to off-road quite a bit, if you don't mind. I think anybody that wants to understand my financial metrics can go on my quarterly statements and MD&As. I want to talk about who Aphria is today and going forward. But to do so really needs to understand who we are back in our glory days of growing up as a small little company in a little greenhouse farming community called Leamington, Ontario, most southerly point in Canada. I think our longitude is equivalent to London, England, and Northern California. Anyways, we were the first to actually demonstrate to the world, at least to the Canadian world, we can grow cannabis in a greenhouse. I'll go through my metrics of how big we are today, but it was a very humble beginning trying to persuade Bay Street to understand that growing in a greenhouse actually has tremendous benefits from a cost structure perspective. And we've proven it time and time again. And I guess imitation is the best form of flattery because a lot of my Canadian colleagues here today either have or are in the middle of designing greenhouse. Aphria has 5 footprints. It starts with, back in 2014, our DNA based on pharma and based on the medical platform. We then launched into a global perspective, Australia being our first, and I'll walk you through that shortly. We then started the evolution of going into the U.S. through the front door, and as many of you probably realize, our foresight and our vision preempted every and any other licensed producer from doing what we were doing with full disclosure and full compliance in the state of Florida. But there were a lot of crybabies in my space, and they were enough to convince the TSX that, Vic, you better dispose of or park on the sidelines certain of your U.S. assets that you had acquired. We remain on the hunt, and we do have activities. It's just you will not see them visibly given the compliancy laws. Finally, or fourthly, I should say, legalization October 17th. I think you've heard enough from a number of my colleagues. It was a most eventful day, very hectic leading up, as well as still today. Short supply and over demand. It's problematic. And I know from Aphria's perspective, our supply chain issues, there still will be need another 2 to 3 months of unraveling a lot of controllable and uncontrollable events at our end. But the space has really started. The journey has begun. And that's important as I get into speculation and rumors of global leaders in different industry sectors. I'm not going to go through the numbers. You can read them for yourselves. But in the Canadian marketplace, $8.7 billion for the rec world in the next 3 years is bigger than the entire beer industry is in Canada. That is remarkable when you think of the amount of consumers consuming alcohol and beer. This is going to overtake. So it should be no surprise to anybody that there are every space conceivable, speaking to consumers from CPG to the entertainment dollar, on wanting to understand this space more. And it's specific to Canada. It's not a question of will legalization happen. It has now happened. So you are going to see a very rapidly paced development of conversations and probably 1 or 2 major deals in the next 3 months, given what October 17th meant to the world. Our international footprint, I mentioned we started off in Australia about 2.5 years ago, an excellent little company called MedLab. We launched also now with Aphria, a public company on the Australian Stock Exchange. Great guys, great teams. And for those that don't really understand how you grow your footprint, it's about the land grab, yes, but it's more about the people that come with those opportunities. And I'm very, very confident of who we have in country in Australia. But since then, and let me now just focus in on Deutschland, we acquired Nuvera almost a year ago, and a great team they had here in Germany. And that was one of the very, very compelling reasons, is the skill set and leadership they brought to the table. But it was the country called Germany. It was at the time where we were in the development of the application process for in-country cultivation. And as we all know, they pushed the pause button. Again, there was one LP that was crying and took it up the pole, and the injunction from the courts. I believe it's mid of November they're going to reopen, and sometime by April of 2019 there should be awarding of licenses. Germany is key to every licensed producer that you have heard, listened, and met here. It is absolutely the country of choice outside of Canada, and will overtake the Canadian marketplace with the right regulatory frameworks. And by that I mean, keep it medical as your journey continues. Keep it medical until you really understand the social implications of cannabis for medical. And yes, recreational users under disguise of medical. This country should really follow and watch what Canada has done. It took us 4.5 years under medical before legal happened. Take your time. Really, really understand its ramifications. Get the regulatory bodies online. Get the media on side. Get the medical community, patients today, which will be consumers tomorrow. That's my and the Aphria Germany messaging to any and all that will listen to us. Italy. As we all know, the military controls, and the military is in great debate on how to move the needle forward on a two-platform basis. One is CBD Light, which is CBD sourced from hemp, and the other opportunity is CBD sourced from cannabis, with ultimately THC cannabis being part of their vocabulary. They're in the midst of this new coalition. There's great harmony and support on moving CBD Light forward. I can tell you Aphria Italy is well positioned with the military and with certain governors of where we want to be a cultivator. And yes, a cultivator growing in a greenhouse. I'll just skip through the other countries, but as you can see, our footprint spans over 10 countries. That was the European community. The acquisition that we closed on a few months ago, very long on the tooth, took us 5 months to cross the finish line. But the key here was Argentina and Colombia. Part of that acquisition was also Jamaica. It's not my pharma DNA coming out here. I'm not a user of Jamaica Gold. However, it was an opportunity that we just couldn't say no to. And obviously the ROFR we have now on Brazil, but Brazil is very slow and very complicated, so I'm not going to try to convey a big success factor at this point in time with Brazil. With the Nuvera acquisition came an unbelievable opportunity of Lesotho, a little tiny kingdom embedded in the middle of South Africa. The grow-up and now the commitment of capital from Aphria to do oil extraction, but as well as packaging under EU GMP compliance is our game plan there. And then that rolls into Malta also, which is our GMP European lab facility. You heard a lot about October 17th in Canada, and the world is watching, but a little micro, Aphria. We have spent over 1.5 years understanding consumer profiles. We have done quantitative, qualitative focus groups. We have gone to influencers. We have spent a lot of time and invested a lot of gray matter to understand who is our consumer. And we've come up with 5 identified population buckets of who the consumer is. Gender-based, age-based, where's their entertainment time spent, the entertainment dollars spent, and we've come up with these 5 brands. Broken Coast, I think, speaks for itself. If you're a Canadian or know anything about Canada, Broken Coast is a licensed producer that I acquired about a year ago. It's on Vancouver Island. It is the premium of premium BC bud, and it's flying off the shelf. On day one, on Wednesday, October 17th, the allotted supply of the SKUs that we sent to BC regulators were sold out in 2 hours. So you can see there are brands that do not need support, and then there are brands like Riff. I don't see any age category here that Riff wants to talk to. It's the 19 through 29-year-old. It's the user who frequents it more than once a week, once a month. It is those that want to be hip. It's edgy. Soleil. Soleil, yes, is a little more gender skewed to the female. It's softer, but it conveys exactly the DNA and the beginnings of Aphria. Powered by the sun, Soleil is really from a sun nature. And we speak softly, and we speak to the novice, and we speak to the passive risk taker who's coming into this category from a legal perspective, and all of the touch points in where he or she spends their entertainment time. Soleil is exactly what you would buy on a Friday night to take home if you've got a backyard barbecue with 3 or 4 couples and you just want to spice up the entertainment that night. Instead of 2 cases of beer and 3 bottles of Cab Sav, you may just want to forgo one of those and pick up 3 pre-rolls of Soleil. The other 2 brands are what we call our entry brands, value brands, where the pocketbook dictates. And it's very important to understand where pricing is today and where it's going tomorrow. And what happens in Canada is going to happen in any other country going forward, where a medical eventually will turn into recreational. I can share with you the Aphria story, and I think I'm not far off from most other licensed producers. On average, blended price from me to the provincial regulators, we're selling in at about $5 Canadian per gram. That does not include our $1 per gram excise. That's the blended average. When you roll that up, when you add the excise tax, add the retail margin, operating costs, etc., and add our sales tax, you are somewhere around $9 to $10 Canadian per gram out the door. I can tell you specifically SAQ, which is the Liquor Control Board of the province of Quebec, their ultimate selling price that they really, really wanted all licensed producers to hit was $7.35 Canadian per gram. I'm out there at about $9.50, so there's a big disconnect. And how did they come up with $7.35? If you understand one of the key objectives of the government, federal and provincial, is to thwart and mitigate, I know never to eliminate, organized crime, proceeds of. In Quebec, they have a preponderance of Hells Angels. That's their organized crime syndicate that is very large, very deep-rooted, and long-standing. Ladies and gentlemen, that sort of group no longer is leather coats, Harleys, and ponytails. These guys wear business suits. They are extremely smart now and staying ahead of the curve and understanding how do they maintain the loyalty of their illegal consumer base. So when this journey began in terms of pricing and Deloitte's, various other government studies, they came out with $10 a gram was what you could buy on the street. And that was almost 2 years ago. 10 became 9, became 8. I can tell you in Ontario, in Toronto, that street from Joe on the street corner, who is serviced by organized crime, is $7. I can tell you it's a little more than $6 in Montreal, in Quebec. Organized crime is smart. They're staying ahead of the curve. They know that they can capture or maintain the bulk of their consumer base based on the pocketbook. So back to Quebec, if 735 was out the door, all taxes in and all operating costs, that meant that I would have to sell to them at $3.75. I'm at $5. At $5, I'm still making somewhere around 70 to 74% margin. Very healthy. My cost structures, based on the last quarter, is somewhere about $1.35 per gram all in. You'll hear shortly, when my expansion is complete, where my cost structures go. South. I will be sub $1. Now, you've heard many licensed producers say that to you here in this audience. I'm producing already. The previous quarter, my cash cost was 94 cents per gram, cash cost. So I am not here anecdotally speaking. I've proven it. But I'll get to that a little later. Back to Quebec. If really the Quebec government is speaking on behalf of all of their other provincial regulator bodies, 375 is the sweet spot for them. And that's because Joe on the street corner is below $7. Joe can go to 6. Joe can go to 5. The point here is there will be price compression. Make no misinterpretation of this. This is factual. I'm not talking about the 5% premium upon premium, my broken coast, which is like $14 a gram out the door, because there will be a market of consumers that are willing to pay for that. But when you look at the bulk of the consumer base, the 85-90% of volume dollars, it is not the premium of premium. It is commodity. It's Soleil. It's Good Supply. It's the Good Fields. It's those that can demonstrate an ability to talk to the pocketbook. So a year from now, and I'll get to it shortly, a year from now, the provinces are expecting all of the licensed producers to have cost reductions. They absolutely will be demanding. And if there's one licensed producer that comes to the table first, pure, simple business economics. Who's going to get the holes on the shelves filled with whose brands? I am telling you, the Aphria story, growing in a greenhouse, low-cost production, and the expansion that you're about to see, where we're going to be, I have already obligated to pass on all operating efficiencies from a cost decrease perspective to meet the objectives of these provincial regulators. So yes, there will be a time within the 12, maybe 15 months where my $5 will be down to 4, be down to 3.75. Now that's based on the products allowed today. The offset to this are the disruptible products that I know will be forthcoming. Vape pens, certain infused foods, and infused beverages. When you bring the disruptibles to the table, higher premium pricing, higher margins. And that's what a lot of licensed producers are waiting for. I'm waiting for that too. Do you know that if there's $7 billion underground economy today, $1 billion, so 15% of that are vape pens. And the government of Canada has not allowed that on opening day. Now, Bill C-45 allows the language to introduce some of this stuff, but it's got to happen fast. That's $1 billion of illegal crime proceeds that we're not getting access to. So a lot of us in the crowd from Canada are really lobbying and really trying to move the needle forward on vape pens. And there are certain infused beverages, more in the wellness category, infused juices, recovery drinks, post-workout drinks, teas. There is evolution of adding CBD from cannabis, not THC, that is just a no-brainer, and that's got to move forward too. Quick snapshot on low-cost producer. Again, I've spoken to it. I'm not going to go into a deep dive. I can just share with you some high-level. Growing in a greenhouse, using Mother Nature at her best. I can tell you, on average, the last time we did this deep dive on other licensed producers, who for the most part at the time were indoor versus my greenhouse, what I spend in 1 year on electricity, 1 year, the average licensed producer growing indoor spends in 1 month. I am 1/12. I have less lights. The intensity of lights are less. They have to use it 12 hours a day, 365 days, and they have to air condition in the summer. When you combine all of those needs of hydro compared to my needs using Mother Nature for a better part of 8 months, 9 months of the year, you can really understand the logic of growing in a greenhouse. Again, low-cost producer will allow me to drive the bus, not if, but when these provincial regulators are going to come back to all of us and say, okay, Joe in the street corner, organized crime has now moved down to $6. We need you to help us out. And if you look at licensed producers, those public statements, and look at their reality of cost structures, not the anecdotal, we'll get there one day, but who has proven themselves. Gang, I've been at this for 4.5 years. If you look at my financials, you know exactly what I'm saying. Some of my comparators, some of my competitors have been at it for 4.5, 5 years, and their cost structures are still unacceptable. Why? You really have to ask yourself, why? Yes, they're now coming to my side, called Greenhouse. That's not a simple undertaking. I have experts. I have guys who have grown in a greenhouse agricultural for decades, and we're still learning. Can you imagine somebody who has been nothing but an indoor trying to understand how to use Mother Nature in June, July, August, September? It's not an easy thing. So back to cost structures, we've proven ourselves. Others are saying to you, believe me, trust me, we'll get there. We'll get close to Aphria is one of the expressions I've heard. Well, you have to make a determination on where your investment dollars go. We have supply agreements on the rec side, coast to coast, including the Yukon. We're very rock solid there. I've been patted on the back in the last few days from SAQ, from Newfoundland, from BEI. I've also had whiplashes from all 3 provinces on having great brands but short supply. And I know a lot of licensed producers are hiding under a rock, will not tell you with full clarity. We all have supply chain issues. All have supply chain issues. Mine was really labor related. The story goes, last week in July, we hired 50 new greenhouse workers on a Monday, and by Saturday we had 8 left. Well, when you have an erosion of that many bodies and you had harvests that needed to be taken off and couldn't, we throw away plants. That's unfortunate. We solved it now, but at the time, that was, I think, 14,000 plants we had to throw away because we could not harvest. Not crop failure, like some licensed producers want to tell you, not at Aphria, strictly a labor issue. Again, I'm not here to talk about financial metrics. You guys can read all you want online, my quarterlies. We're very proud. We had 11, almost 12, investment in our last quarter, both internationally, but also preceding the activation of our rec brands, brought our EBITDA to a negative, but 11 solid straight quarters. A bunch of ugly faces, you don't want to see that. Market cap, again, I think everybody in this room can so easily find out what, where, how. So I want to now go back, because I love off-roading. Today, this very moment, in beautiful Leamington, Ontario, we have 300,000 feet of greenhouse. We're growing somewhere between 25 to 30,000 kilos on an annualized basis. Our Part 5 is completed, waiting for Health Canada. That's another 200,000 feet of greenhouse just to be the home of our mothers. Can you imagine 200,000 feet of greenhouse just for your stock inventory of mothers? We have part 4 that should be done in the next 7 to 10 days, and then a request to Health Canada to come in for a site inspection. That adds another 700,000 feet of greenhouse. And probably sometime late November, early December, the retrofit of Aphria Diamond, a separate greenhouse facility about 5-6 kilometers north of Aphria 1, the facility I just described. 30 acres, adding 1.3 million square feet of greenhouse, brand new Dutch greenhouse with never a crop in there. When you add up everything I'm trying to describe, our campuses will have 2.5 million square feet of greenhouse, a little more than 500,000 feet of infrastructure, oil extraction, processing, drying, QA/QC labs, yes, a kitchen for certain food products, etc., etc. We will be kicking ass. By May of 2019, we will be producing in excess of 20,000 kilos a month, 255,000 kilos annualized. When you look at the projection of the Canadian marketplace, medical plus recreational for 2020, we're looking anywhere from 600 to 700,000 kilos. It grows to over a million. But at the point in time for analytics and analysis and those analysts that want to look at capacity, that's way more than the Canadian marketplace will need if all other licensed producers complete their build-outs and build and grow what they have tried to communicate to the investing public. There will be oversupply. I can repeat. Extreme short supply now. And for the Aphria story, we need another 2 or 3 months to get ourselves out of the situation. We will be the first, if not one of the first, to come to the rescue on the short supply. A year from today, there will be more coming on board. And when simple crossing of supply and demand happen, prices usually fall. Your job is to understand who is best to survive, compete successfully with financial black ink to the bottom line, not red ink. Do your own homework, try to understand the growth models. Canada Medical, Canada Recreational, Global. I'll just park the U.S. conversation just in case anybody from the TSX or NYSE are here. But that's the story of Aphria. We are most proud of how we started, who we are. I have a very strong management team. I'll also be the very first to say it's very thin. I need more and more leaders. I have Henrik here, our in-country leader for Germany, Denmark, Armando in Italy. I mean, the list goes on and on. I have strong teams in respective countries, and that's where the other home run hits. It's those countries that move the needle following the Canadian model. So I know this was a Canadian invasion of sorts to beautiful Frankfurt. I appreciate the time on behalf of all of my colleagues and the Canadian identity of medical. Today, recreational. I repeat, I hope Germany doesn't go rec too quickly. You really got to tread quietly and softly and thoroughly to understand what landmines may lie in front of you and follow what Canada's doing. What problems we're going to have in the next 2, 3, 4, 6 months. Don't fall into the traps that we're bound to fall in. So, again, danke sehr, meine Herren und Damen.